Welcome to the February 15th, 2022 City Council discussion only meeting. I'll begin with the roll call.
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Brookover. Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Bacon.
Present. I'll present a motion to excuse Councilmember Brookover's absence due to out-of-state travel. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Councilperson Brookover, or Babcock. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Seconded in abstention.
That was incredible. Look for a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda. Second.
Moved by Babcock, second by Watson. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next up, communication from the audience. We'll look for anyone in person who would like to speak first, and if you're in person, please fill out the blue card with your information. In person, going twice. All right. Anyone on the online queue?
We do not have any callers on the line.
All right. Next up, communication from council. Councilperson Babcock.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to remind people that I do have a new city council telephone number. It is 517-290-2943, and it is miraculously free of the gremlins that plague my personal phone, so I'd encourage people to use that. I'm horrified. I just discovered a message from someone from October. It's a little late to get back to you. I'm sorry about that, Mr. Vodopek. But also, I was absolutely thrilled to see the new bright spot in downtown East Lansing, but I think I'll let perhaps our DDA and art delegation down there speak to it. And lastly, because utility poles, I used to work in energy, they're not supposed to catch fire, so that was adventuresome. I was in the middle of, if I may say so myself, a brilliant argument in court by Zoom, and poof, the power went out. It's okay, I dialed back in. But I will say, we got that up and running in record time, considering what happened. I mean, that was real effort, and a lot goes into that moment. And I'd like to thank DPW and our coordination with Board of Water and Light. I know they're still working on that on my street, on terrain. But all things considered, that went very, very well. So thank you to all involved.
Councilperson Watson.
Pass.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Yes, as Councilmember Babcock alluded, we have some decorative artwork that went up around one of our construction sites downtown. I want to call attention to the fact that that's a collaboration with our local elementary schools. So each one of those panels was decorated by a group of students locally here. I am particularly fond of the Pac-Man one because I'm pretty Gen X and nostalgic, but they all look great. I think I recognize the Rolling Stones logo and some other kind of Argyle-esque geometry. So if you want to check that out, it's downtown Abbott and Grand River on the MSU FCU construction site. So considerable improvement to that, and cheers to our placemaking team for getting that coordinated. And yep, that was pretty exciting to lose power with 3 kids on a day where it was like about 19 degrees. We used all the blankets, but it did come on quickly, and we enjoyed our candlelight.
Last but not least, we're excited to kind of resume some of our normal meetings for our boards and commissions. We proceeded, myself and Councilperson Watson, with Police Oversight Commission last night. I want to thank the Police Oversight Commission for their hard work and doing a little bit of catch up, and also thank Chief Johnson for coming in and sharing with the group, really helping us get up to speed. And the department has been very forthright and helpful in us as we're trying to kind of get things set up and offering their time, which is very limited. So I just want to say kudos and thank you guys for sharing so much of that valuable time with us. And we'll continue, hopefully, proceeding with boards and commissions. Hopefully we continue to see some recession in the pandemic, and we were able to move forward in a little bit more regular manner. But our intention now is to move forward with normal scheduled boards and commissions going forward. So we're looking forward to that part of it. And that's it from me. City Manager's report.
Nothing to report. Thank you, Mayor.
On to item 6.1, discussion of marketing of city property at Coleman and West Roads.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Tom Fehrenbach. I am the Director of Planning, Building, and Development for the city. And tonight, we just have a brief presentation for you, a little background on the property that's owned by the city, and looking for some kind of policy questions to the council as far as how we move forward in marketing the property. So, thank you, Jackson. If you go ahead and start you can just move to the second slide. Just a brief primer here. This is the site location. It's about 26.8 acres at the southwest corner of Coleman and West. Go ahead, next slide. Here's just a parcel overview. You can see in this drawing kind of where the Coleman Road extension was planned, and that has actually gone into place. So go ahead, next slide. In terms of the background, this is a property that the city acquired in 2018. Really as a way to avoid a large tax liability. The purchase price was just north of $400,000. In November of 2019, the voters authorized the sale of the property, and the Coleman Road extension was completed in the summer of 2020 as we were cleaning up some of the title issues and doing some of the prerequisite kind of due diligence on the property, doing site research, et cetera. We did come to the council and authorize NAI Mid-Michigan to represent us and list the property, which did happen in August 2020. And I just wanted to note that representative from NAI, Dave Robinson, is here tonight if you do have any questions for his direction. Since that time, really there has been no interest that's aligned with either the current zoning or the envisioned zoning in the master plan. As the council's aware, we have had some interest from housing developers, but because that is not in line with our vision for the site, that has not moved forward at this time. So currently, the zoning is B4, which is restricted to office product, and that is office that takes a number of different flavors: general office, dental, medical, financial, et cetera, but it's pretty limited just to kind of office uses. They're limited to 2 stories or 36 feet allowed by right, and up to 3 stories or 50 feet with a special use permit. In terms of the future land use designation as part of kind of our master plan and the vision for this site, there is a designation known as C3 commercial. Go ahead, next slide. And this is not a zoning type. It's a future land use designation, so it doesn't really exist currently. And the way it reads in the master plan, it's not currently analogous to any zoning type. So we would need to address that in terms of moving forward with this future land use designation, which is typical as part of the master plan process, and then ultimately how we mechanize that. So this envisions more potential for height, so 6 stories or 84 feet is possible, and it broadens the allowable uses significantly, but really specifically for commercial type uses, so not housing. Light manufacturing, warehouse, vehicle rental, hospital, laboratory, extended care and nursing facilities, health clubs, indoor recreation, hotel, retail, restaurant, services, professional office, and museum, among, I think, some others. But you get the sense that it's really a commercial kind of employment-centered type use. So we have been working to kind of beef up the marketing efforts, and we pulled in some partners and put together some plans for the site. It is 27 acres, and so we wanted to kind of provide some sense of what could be developed here, both for the council tonight to kind of give us some guidance as to what you like, what you might not like, what you see as priorities, but also ultimately we'd like to add this to kind of the marketing materials to show the market not only what's possible, but also what the council feedback has been tonight. I think that would be really helpful to the market to understand kind of the council's desires ultimately for the site, and we have some big questions for you at the end. So this is one of the two concepts. You can see, the existing wetlands are kind of preserved and utilized as really part of the natural aspects of this property. There's a mix of uses: the corporate office, an assisted living facility, which would look out onto the wooded area, or it could be a 4-story hotel, and some offices along West Road. In terms of the pros, I think from kind of a marketing planning perspective, this does have the high visibility to 127. There's frontage on West Road. The assisted living is adjacent to the open space and potential medical offices. There's parking, which is largely internal and hidden from the main roads. And we do preserve the existing wetland and woodlot. And there is some opportunity there for trails. In terms of cons, there is no commercial or restaurant uses within walking distance for office workers and assisted living. That they'd have to drive to find those uses. And there is a lot of concrete, a lot of high impervious surface area. I won't get into the stormwater strategy. We can, if you have any questions regarding that. But you can kind of see in the bottom right a general sense of how we might parcelize this site, either for one developer or for multiple, and start to give it a sense for that. In terms of the second concept, a little bit different, adds the commercial, retail, restaurant, and fitness towards West Road, and kind of rethinks the office and corporate office and green space aspects of this. In terms of the pros, there's very synergistic uses in terms of the fitness, the commercial, and restaurant, which would also be an amenity for the office workers. Still that high visibility. This would have a less impact on the existing wetlands. Again, the walkable connections off-site. Internal and hidden parking lots are definitely more aesthetically pleasing. And there is green buffers along the roads, as well as 6 acres of preserved wetlands and woodlot. Again, with the cons as the high impervious surface area, and you could get a sense here in the bottom right also of sort of how we might parcelize. You can see in this instance we're creating a conservation easement on the northwest portion of the site, and then would be presumably either selling off three separate parcels for development. So with that, really the key questions for discussion tonight are there any particular uses that the council would prioritize for the marketing? Should we feature one or both of these concepts, or should we work on a third concept that is more in line with kind of how the council wants to position this in the marketplace? Is there a level of comfort to splitting the parcels in various configurations to allow for a different mix of uses and potential multiple buyers and multiple developers, and potentially over time in a phased approach? And ultimately, as the Planning Commission through the Housing Near-Term Action Strategy is going to be having a discussion about the future land use map in the northern tier, and adding really a housing lens, asking those questions again as to whether housing is desired by the community. Is there any direction or guidance that the council would like to transmit to the Planning Commission as they discuss that on the 23rd of February? So that is it from my presentation. I'd be happy to take any of your questions. And again, we do have representatives from our real estate experts here if you have any questions specific to them.
Mayor, I just had one quick request. I can't hear Mr. Fernbach as much as I want to. I think I've got a fan underneath, but can he get turned up just so I don't have to try as hard to make sure I hear
You
everything?
sure you don't want me to start over? Or?
No, no.
I request, though. On your presentation, can we jump back to the very first slide that just kind of oriented us to where this parcel was?
Sure.
And then I have a lot of questions, so if anybody wants to jump in, just please interrupt my rant.
I'll go last.
So, the Willows is an assisted living facility, right? And now what's labeled the Beaumont, is that more elderly housing, or is that just market rate apartments?
The Beaumont's just market rate apartments. I believe there are also some other types of housing on the Beaumont property, but the main thrust is apartments.
It's just apartments. And do we have a sense of whether or not that is an apartment complex that is managing to market to people who are not associated with being students at MSU?
We do. I think that was certainly part of the approval process for that particular project, and we've met recently actually with the owner of and the operator of the Beaumont, and it seems very clear that it's a broad range of different types of tenants and probably minimal amount of students.
Okay. So this kind of feeds in with my preferred site concept is concept 2, the one that has got a little bit more, to my mind, a little bit more flexibility. I think you guys probably picked Caribou Coffee deliberately because you know that I'm from Minnesota, so well played. But the reason that I like this is we are getting a lot of housing up in the northern tier. And right now, they're kind of in a little bit of an island in terms of services. They've got Meijer, obviously, but in terms of like a coffee shop that you can walk to, Espresso Royale closed, unfortunately, during the pandemic. And then we also know that we have all of the office users in the MSU FCU campus north of there. And so it seems like there is kind of a gap for, retail/restaurant. Retail opportunities up there. I wonder, now this is gonna, like to totally flip the coin and to talk about nothing to do with either of your concepts. One of the C3 uses on your land use map was warehouse and light industrial and manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason that we're not thinking about that at all? It just seems like it's a type of industry that we don't have a place to put in East Lansing right now. And if we wanted to be welcoming to all types of businesses, it might make sense to create a place where they could do business.
I don't think there's a specific reason. I think, it definitely was brought up in the conversation we had leading up to the design. So it's something we could certainly revisit. I'm
just curious. I don't know that we have a demand, but it does seem like jobs are jobs, and manufacturing is something that we're not currently offering to either as an employer or as for an entrepreneur with an idea wanting to locate close to home. Mm-hmm. And then I know we had at least 2 different interested parties that wanted to do housing. I always was a little baffled by that because of the proximity to the highway. This just seems unpleasant, I guess, in terms of a place to live.
Sure.
I remember home shopping in East Lansing and shopping in the Franderer Hills neighborhood that's similar in proximity to US 127 and having to raise my voice to hear my realtor in the front yard of the house. So I don't think that's a great concept, but did you get to the point with those developers where they were kind of justifying their interest in this area? Like, what was their answer to that, I guess?
Certainly, I think they pointed to other housing developments that they've been involved with or aware of that are near or proximate to other freeways, and the fact that there are things that they can do from a building perspective, things they can do from a locational aspect to mitigate the noise impacts. So they didn't seem to think it was a big concern in terms of their ability to manage that, and they did like the fact that the wetlands are in the northwest corner
Buffers it just a little bit, yeah.
Offers a bit of a chance for a buffer. So.
And then, you nailed my main opposition to both of these renderings, which are those giant impermeable parking lots. I don't know, surface parking is environmentally terrible and I don't like it, but I also know that East Lansing's got something against parking garages, so I'm alone in that, but that's okay. I prefer to see higher buildings and less parking, but that's just me. I think I'm done for now.
Okay. And just please, everyone, can you just try to speak into your microphones? I think I'm having trouble hearing, but I just can't hear everyone as well as I'd like to. So the housing developers, were any of them LMI builders, low to moderate income?
In terms of the interest we've received, no. I think that mainly they were kind of multi-family type developments that ultimately, we're trying to cast a wider net in terms of the market demand. So, I think what they would be looking at is there's an unmet demand certainly for kind of people who want to rent a different type of product that doesn't exist in East Lansing right now or exists on a limited scale. So they were mentioning things like, young professionals, senior, active seniors, and some of the amenities they would provide that would serve those types of folks, like the zero access, having access to a garage, various amenities, having different types of building products on the site so that there's multiple options for different types of kind of living arrangements, things like that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, am I talking to my mic?
Oh, yeah, you're
Okay.
good. Thank you. You know how we get information on that we've overbuilt for student housing, or rules that we can't have too many cannabis stores in a certain mile radius, et cetera? So my question is it the same for assisted living facilities? It feels like we have too many, but it's not. It's also not something that I know a lot about as a.
So it would be
Percentage.
limited only by, where the zoning allows it, and then whether the market feels that that it's appropriate to build more of that type of product. Certainly what we understand right now is there's still demand in the marketplace. Whether that, has changed as a result of the provision living being put in the ground right now, I'm not certain, but those would be really the limiting factors, not any sort of regulation on the city's side.
Thank you. That's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Like Councilmember Gregg, sorry, Dana, that was one extreme to the other. Like Councilmember Gregg, I would favor the more flexible plan. If we can get offices, that's great, but again, everything I'm hearing from people who work in them is that they're working very hard to get out of their leases, and, office employment isn't what it was. That said, anytime it's East Lansing, and we're fortunate. People want to be here. So a good mix benefits us all, and I think we'll be successful. So.
I did have one more thing. Were you done?
Mhm.
We've got several site plans that went through planning for hotels kind of in this area. Are any of those going forward, or did they kind of stagnate?
Well, the 3225 West Road project is moving forward.
Okay.
I believe they're at like the final stages of building permit, getting building permits. So that is the one that's moving forward. There's been other overtures. There was, I remember, an adjacent parcel that there was a hotel developer interested in.
But
that never came to fruition.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my thought about hotel up in that area was that it was really focused around the banking campuses and people coming in and out of town for business, and I think that's another type of travel that's been pretty highly impacted by Corona. Similar, people have realized they don't have to do business in person, and so they're not flying. So I was just kind of curious about that one project and where it was at in terms of what's needed.
They're still
where.
moving forward. It's a little bit different because it's a long-term stay type product.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
So I think they're more geared towards people who are visiting for MSU for longer
Like a
periods of
visiting
time.
professor
Yeah.
or a, okay, got it, guest faculty or something.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, more broadly, I think I just want to see all this stuff considered in one plan. I feel like we're kind of fishing for what wants to be here. Kind of like, if we look at all the other projects, we kind of survey, we ask what's needed, what's this, that, and the other. And some of the stuff comes in, it feels like we'll take whatever the developer brings, and is it actually a need? Do we just want out of the property? I mean, none of that's going to be set across here. I would like to see us really, I mean, we're a land poor city. That's the best way you can put it. So I think everything going forward has to be part of some continuity of what else we think we need here in East Lansing. And that's kind of my broad concern in general as we seek out projects and other things. We did more, felt like more question asking of the needs with art space and other things, and we're going the northern tier and it's just kind of whatever. You know, that's just my impression. And I think all this has to tie together. If we're going to do something different in Evergreen or with this there and the other, it has to tie into what, because we're running out of options for what we're going to do next and what's going to fit and what East Lansing needs. So I think all this has to be contingent and part of a broader strategy for East Lansing and what's the last things and the last needs of the community. I think that's just kind of where I sit with it. I just don't have any real appetite for the next set of random things. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I think there's been a lot of different plans and a lot of different administrations that sat up here, and huge swatches of East Lansing just look random. You know, like, it's just like, why is that there? Kind of thing. And I just don't want to be the next person around that. So no offense to any of the work that's been done. It's really cool. I just want to see it tied into all the other projects that we're considering right now. If we really want office here, does that take away from the opportunity to do office closer to the city? Is that then take away from the opportunity from the next tall building or whatever someone's going to want to do? That's just I think that's how we have to think going forward. And what do we actually need versus what do they want to put here? So I'm pretty sure a lot of people want to put stuff here, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, lots of big challenges in that discussion there, and I think, you know, you highlight some of the challenges and frankly frustrations in terms of, you know, our process, right? We go through a lot of conversations to update the master plan, and then when we get to the point where you know, something might happen, and we're kind of, you know, we really have to look at the master plan, which now is, you know, 4 years in, and say, are we still in line with that? And I think that's part of the reason why through the housing study, it percolated up as to really take another look at the master plan itself and the future land use map. And I think that's the appropriate place for us to ask some of those questions and have some of those conversations. And so if you think we should broaden that effort and have a broader conversation about the future land use map in this area or any other area, it's certainly the council's purview to provide that direction to the planning commission, to make sure that those aspects are part of the conversation, so that we can ensure that we're aligned with today's kind of future visioning. And that's really the council's purview. So
Yeah, I think COVID changed everything. And if we're working off old stuff, I don't think that fits. And the workforce changed. You know, I mean, people aren't going to return to offices, but they are going to obviously build batteries here, and that's 2,500, 2,900, whatever people here. Is East Lansing going to participate in this expansion of other things outside of, you know, are we going to be ready? I feel like if we do this old plan, we're going to be sitting here and going, well, we'll be the next administration to ask, why is that there? Kind of thing. You know, that's just my broad concern. That's bigger than kind of all of us, but that's how we got to approach it going forward. I think it's time to kind of hold on and get a feel for what's actually happening here. I know if they're saying the state's down 18,000 housing units or this, that, and the other, and Lansing's the fastest growing region in the Midwest, yada, 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 are we setting to capture that, or are we just kind of still doing something from 5 years ago? That's a new revelation. So that's just kind of my broad concern. And I know developers develop. Like, they don't, if they can get the plan, no offense to the gentleman in the audience, but that's his job to develop and do things along those lines. But yeah, I want to make sure East Lansing gets their fair share of whatever's next. And I'm afraid if we lock ourselves, there won't be an opportunity to do that. So City Manager?
I think you made a lot of good points that, East Lansing is largely landlocked, and that's been a problem with East Lansing for years now. And obviously over the prior 2 decades, we sought to increase that and move north and gain some land through some 425 agreements, and perhaps some of the development being a little bit, varied up there was a result of that land coming in ways where it wasn't necessarily planning, but the city took in land that was on our borders for reasons at that point, and it happened incrementally. But this land really provides, I think, us with a great opportunity, because we saw an opportunity 2 years ago to purchase this land. It's a key piece of property for the city, very visible. It's in an area where there was great sort of prospects for office, with MSU-FCU expanding up there and making it their, expanding headquarters. And it really presented an opportunity, we thought, for office. But then over the last so when we started this process, you saw those projections and what the pictures look like. But here we are 2 years later and wondering, is that really viable at this point? Or does there have to be a little bit of a resetting of the deck? I don't think it necessarily competes with what's downtown and evergreen properties, because if someone wants to be downtown urban area, a downtown environment next to the university as opposed to more suburban type headquarters is going to be two different operations potentially. But I think it is reasonable to look at that parcel and say, is it reasonable? I'd love to have a large office, a large employer up there. It may not be in the cards at this point, and it may be something to reset and relook at and say, what are all the different uses, including potentially housing, and say to have the Planning Commission look at all that. But it really puts the city in the driver's seat. To Councilmember Watson's perspective about affordable housing, could you potentially put RFPs out that include components of these things that we want to see? So unlike the master plan where it's just what's the land going to look like, we control this property. The city council can direct how this could look into the future, and then we can seek proposals. I mean, of course, there's got to be a developer, but it really puts the council in sort of the driver's seat to say what you want to see up there. So a great opportunity for the city, I think.
So many questions. I love this stuff. Anyway, the C3 designation, is there something similar that encompasses a flexibility of uses that also includes some residential?
No, I don't even think there's anything analogous to C3 really that's
Okay.
like close. So we would have to either look at existing zoning and do a text amendment or create new zoning.
Okay. Yeah, I think to Councilmember Bacon's point, I think my opposition to the northern tier kind of style that we've done up there so far is a lot of single-story buildings and big flat parking lots, and to me that's kind of a not forward-thinking way to structure our very limited resource of land. Once you put a building on something, I think you got to figure that building's going to be there for 60 years or so. And so if as we move forward, having the same eye towards walkability, livability, traffic flow that we talk about when we talk about our very dense, very busy downtown, I don't think there's any reason in terms of space. We don't have that much space. I think in 50 years, there's a very real possibility that East Lansing in the northern tier will be as vital as some of our near-in neighborhoods if we do it correctly, which would mean, not abandoning big blocks of single-story office suites up there, which can be part of that, but it shouldn't be all of it, right? So, and we already have a bit of that up there, but we also have, we have assisted living, we have apartments, we've got detached housing up there. I mean, we have a lot of ingredients, but we don't have stew yet, kind of. So I guess if the question before us is it worth marketing that piece as a splittable parcel, then I would definitely say yes. And I think revisiting the master plan and the future land use in a post-COVID era is probably a good idea as well.
Something we might consider as we have a longer-term discussion is whether we need to require as many parking spaces as we do for certain uses, and also whether we can have some of those parking spaces using something like turf stone, which is a semi-impermeable surface that could look like lawn, which would certainly address some of those environmental concerns. And again, as we talk long-term, one of the things the Commission on the Environment was very interested with this parcel was any sort of environmental, particularly generation of green. We were interested in anything that moved green energy forward. So we could also consider requiring a level of sustainability, requiring some LEED certification. And LEED is now close to 20 years outdated, so we could go much further than that. The chargers over the parking lots at MSU are fantastic. We don't even blink when we see them anymore. We just sort of figure they're there. And we could require that built into the buildings. There are also green energy programs such as PACE, which need to work with a private developer, but give certain incentives and credits for generating like rooftop solar, that sort of thing. I would have loved to have championed that on city buildings, but so far the problem is that the PACE program has to work with a private developer, a private business owner. So there are all kinds of options. And now that you've got me going, I could keep going all night, but we don't have a plan ahead of us, and so I was sort of saving that for later or for a longer-term master plan. Something else I've noticed in my years in East Lansing, and everywhere else I've ever lived, they zone first and fill later. And East Lansing often does sort of the opposite. Somebody wants to build something, so the city has historically changed or created the zoning to accommodate someone who's coming in, as the mayor had said. And this could be the council that changes that practice. When I first watched East Lansing do this, I was a little unmoored, and I called someone who does a lot of development in this area, and I said, is everywhere else I've been the zebra, or is East Lansing the zebra? He was like, definitely East Lansing is the zebra. And that may have worked very well for many decades. I mean, it has. We've got a great community. But perhaps that's something that we consider as a policy and procedural shift on how we envision the city, and then letting others come in and adapt to our vision.
Yeah, but yeah, so basically, Tom, in summation of kind of what I was saying, to put a positive spin as the cheerleader, I think it's just that we think bigger and out of the box, and just if we're thinking one way, one place, I know people are saying there's no difference, but I think the Earth's obviously moving under our feet, and then you can see all the moves. You watch the Super Bowl, you see the moves on electrification, you see the moves, something different. I'd hate to be in the plan from last year, next year. I don't think they're the same plan. There's a lot's shifting really fast. So it's a catch-22. So I'm not saying wait. I'm probably just saying think bigger. And I think everybody's got to be, in the entire region's got to be thinking housing. And maybe not there, but can we leverage that to attract someone else? Whatever we're putting there, is that to make any other of the non-city-owned properties in the northern tier more attractive for housing? Yeah, it's got to all kind of feed into one. It's got to be a little bit broader strategy, I think, at this point, or else we put that, I could just see that being all weird and chopped up. So that's it for me. But yeah, think bigger, because this is kind of the last time we have to think about it, it looks like.
Your comment about it being chopped up, Mayor, would it make sense, and I guess maybe I'm looking towards our marketing people at this point, would it make sense to set a minimum size that we're willing to split down to, so that we don't end up with a lot of tiny fractured parcels? I think both of your renderings had 3 kind of approximately equal developments with the easement for the natural area, which seems like a kind of a generous size on a 20-acre parcel. Refresh my memory, if you remember, the hub site is approximately 1 acre, if I'm remembering correctly, or is it 2?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay, never mind.
I would probably think more closer to the 1.
Okay, so that's what 1 acre looks like, very closely built to its lot lines. So, a 15-acre parcel is fairly generous and not exactly, looming. But 20 1-acre parcels might not be what we want.
Last but not least for me, I'll throw back to the city manager on that. Maybe it's time to annex something else. So just put that in your ear.
Unfortunately, the timing that we stopped doing the 425s and annexation, the state sort of turned back cities and kind of had this balancing act that I think was kind of ill-advised in that it favored townships and gave townships a lot more power in regards to cities' annexation. And I think that sort of perpetuates sprawl and doesn't let cities, it kind of chokes off cities. And it was one of these kind of things that I think was a bad policy decision that puts cities in a worse situation. So we'd love to look for opportunities to expand in the northern area, and I think there's more conversations with the townships about extending the existing agreements. So there may be some more conversations in that regard.
Great. Any further questions or comments? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Next up, item 6.2, presentation on the general fund 5-year financial forecast.
I'll just start off while Jill makes her way to our new staff table here. So this is really the unofficial kickoff for the budget process. The 5-year forecast is not just sort of gives us a first look at what the budget's going to look like, but it also kind of gives us a real look at the next 5 years in terms of trying to manage from a better perspective. You know, when I first came to the city about 20 years ago, we didn't use a 5-year forecast, and every year it was kind of, what's the budget going to look like once we get it together? When we started about 15 years ago using the 5-year forecast, it really was an enormous tool for management to be able to make longer-term decisions and see those trends coming down the road and be able to make adjustments in a more timely basis. So I really think the 5-year forecast, in terms of being a management tool, has helped us successfully navigate the last decade of financial challenges. So I really look at this as kind of a 10,000-foot view of the budget process for this next year. It gives us a snapshot of what it's going to look like. I would tell you that typically when we put the budget together, the numbers seem to get a little bit tougher and tighter, not better. But you'll see here, and not to sort of take away Jill's thunder, but you'll see a continued challenge of some continued challenges in terms of our financial performance, and that we are not out of the woods in terms of financial challenges. There's going to be some decisions that need to be made to be able to deliver a budget to council that uses little or no fund balance, and that's going to be a continued challenge. It's nothing we haven't dealt with in the past, but it's something that continues for us. So we'll have Jill go through the forecast, and then, of course, council to ask questions. But from this point on, we'd also certainly like to hear from council if there's things in terms of the budget process as we're preparing the budget that council would like to see differently, in addition to, or changes. When we deliver the council the budget in April, it's largely put together. So if you have suggestions for us at this point, that is certainly helpful to incorporate that into the budget process. If there's discussions or items you want to discuss further, we can certainly put that on further agendas and talk about them next week and the week after and continue that conversation. So, and again, we'll be delivering the council the budget in April, and that's when we start the budget conversation on a weekly basis. Jill?
Good evening. So as George said, this will be my first of many times in front of you for the next few months. If you want to go ahead and start the presentation, Jackson.
Jill, could you pull your microphone just to
You may
touch
want
it?
to pull it to this side of you so when you're looking at council, it may help it stay in front of you. It's kind of, yeah, that would be better.
Okay, next slide. So first I want to just point out that this is the general fund only. We have many other funds, the income tax fund, the streets fund, solid waste, water, sewer, parking, lots of them, all to be discussed in April and May. Also, I want to tell you that this excludes any ARPA dollars. So because ARPA dollars are planned to be used on new costs, the intent would be that the revenue would offset the new cost, right? So there's no need to really show it here. It's kind of a budget neutral item. I did give you the hard copy of the forecast if that's easier for you to look at. I am also going to have blown up pieces of the forecast in the presentation, so hopefully that's helpful as well. In the forecast, you'll have pages 1 through 3, which are really risks and vulnerabilities. So this is more big picture, things that are happening nationwide, statewide, and in the city. Then pages 4 through 7 are noteworthy items. This is more specific to the current year. Pages 8 through 10 are assumptions. So these are very specific to line items and categories, what the assumptions we're using for all years. Page 11 is actually a legal size piece of paper in your printout, and it's yellow for that to stand out. But that's really the forecast itself, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time tonight. And then pages 12 through 15 gives you a lot of good information on taxable value. So not only taxable value, but also the assessed value or the state equalized value. So it kind of gives you a history of SEV as well as taxable value. It also shows you the developments that are in place or projected for the next 5 years. And then pages 16 through 19 are revenue and expenditure details. So it kind of is a more detailed look at what's on page 11. Next slide, please. So the layout, just real quick, I'm going to run through how this page 11 is laid out. Along the top, you're going to see the years and percentage changes. We show the 21 actual, the 22 budget, and the 22 expectation, and then the 5-year forecast. In the upper left-hand section is the revenue section. Well, I should say the upper top section is revenue. In the green area, you're going to see the growth or decline, overall revenue. Then we have expenditures. Again, in the green, it will show overall growth or decline. Then in the blue, we're going to see the total fund balance. So I want to just note that this is total fund balance. As you're aware, there's lots of things that go into fund balance. We have things that are set aside for special purposes. We have this land that's available for sale that Tom just talked about. That's part of our fund balance. So that's why we then show at the bottom the available fund balance. So this is backing out those special purpose dollars and the land that's available for sale, as that's not really cash in our pocket. Then we show the available fund balance as a percentage of our operating expenditures. So as a reminder, City Council has a policy, our fund balance policy calls for 8 to 15% for fund balance. So this kind of gives you a idea of where we would fall if this forecast became reality. And then finally at the bottom, it shows the accumulation or use of fund balance. So that's just a quick talk about the layout. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to talk real quick about each revenue line item. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt me. I'm going to just kind of start at the top. So property taxes and marijuana taxes. So property taxes is the majority of this money. Marijuana tax is a new line item that started, I believe, last year. And that's about $85,000 is what's projected. So the rest of this is property taxes. We're expecting a 3.2% increase in fiscal year 23, and that's primarily due to the CPI factor. So under Proposal A, we're limited to the lesser of 5% or CPI. In my time, it's always been CPI. I've never seen 5%. 3.3% is what it is this year, and that is a very large amount in my time here at the city, which is 15 years. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Moving on to the transfers from income tax fund. So this is made up of two pieces. This is the reimbursement from the lower property tax amount when we put the income tax in place. It's also the 20% public safety allocation. The public safety allocation is about $1.3 million. So the rest of that is really the reimbursement for the lower property tax amount. Then we have state shared revenue. You can see in fiscal year 21, we actually had a large amount. We had $6.3 million. Fiscal year 22, we're expecting it to be about $6.1 million. That large amount in fiscal year 21 is really the sign of people spending stimulus dollars, right? So we had a lot of sales tax collections in fiscal year 21. That was actually one of our concerns when COVID hit of like, what is this going to do to our state revenue sharing? Because by the Constitution, we are allocated a certain amount. So if sales tax goes down in the state, that impacts our revenue sharing. Conversely, it goes up, we benefit from that. But when the pandemic hit, we were very concerned that our sales tax would actually plummet, but it didn't. So we saw an increase there in 21, but we are seeing it decline a little bit in 22. And that's as people have slowed in their spending, we're seeing that decline. In 23, I am leaving this flat. This is based on the projections from the state of Michigan from their January revenue economic outlook. They're expecting sales tax to be somewhat flat, maybe a small decline. I left it flat to hopefully be optimistic. The other thing that is happening here is our census count was lower And so we will see a small reduction from that because revenue sharing is based off of your census count. And that will obviously follow us through the next 10 years. Another thing I'll note on the revenue sharing is you may have seen that the governor came out with her budget proposal last week. She did include a 10% increase to statutory revenue statutory revenue. So there's a constitutional piece, which is the majority of our revenue sharing, but we get about 1.6 million in statutory revenue sharing. So that's what the legislature can decide what to do with. So she is proposing a 10% increase, which is about $160,000. Now, of course, it still has to go through the rest of the process. 5% of that is projected to be a permanent change, and the other 5% to be a one-time. So some positive news there, but we'll see what actually comes out. The other thing that the budget from the governor included was no clawback. So technically, our census impact should have hit us already, and they haven't because it's been slow in the census coming out, and they haven't been able to adjust our revenue sharing. She is proposing that we are held harmless and we don't have to pay that money back. So another positive that hopefully will come to fruition. The next line, PA 289, this is the fire protection. This was fully funded beginning in fiscal year 20. So this almost doubled our revenue, and we now have been staying pretty steady at about 3.3 million. The forecast assumes some small inflation. Again, this is a factor of our actual costs compared to the values of the property that's protected in the city of East Lansing, compared to the rest of the state and what the state appropriates. I'm going to jump over intergovernmental revenue and go to franchise fees. Again, we're seeing small increases here. This is our BWL franchise as well as our cable franchise revenue. Licenses and permits, this one kind of fluctuates from year to year as we have development. So more development, more building permits. Housing licenses kind of fluctuate from year to year. We did see an increase with the new developments that have come online, the new housing developments. We also see fluctuations as we have a 13-month cycle, so not every month has the same amount of licenses being renewed or the same amount of revenue being generated. So that causes some of our fluctuations. We do have some increases shown here for our forecast, which is a risk, to be determined as we firm up our 23 budget. Fines and forfeitures, this is an area we've seen a lot of decline over the years. We started seeing declines a few years ago. With COVID, we saw even more significant declines. We did see some return here in fiscal year 22, specifically in the parking fines. And I think we're still trying to figure out what our new normal is. So where are we going to really land post-COVID and post our change in policing and enforcement? Charges for services, this is primarily made up of like ambulance services, shared services, whether it's with MSU, Meridian Township, other services provided. It also includes court cost recovery. So when we're recovering the cost, whether it be the city attorney cost or court costs, that's also included in this category. So we are seeing in fiscal year 21, it was 2.9. Now there's a little caveat there, 800,000 of that was the sale of lot 4. So we are really around 2.1 million. And this was one of those categories in fiscal year 21 that got hit really hard, right? Little activity, not many ambulance runs. We weren't sharing services. We weren't providing services to MSU for football games, basketball games, and the like. In fiscal year 22, we're starting to see some rebound of that, and that's specifically in the ambulance and the charges to like MSU or Meridian Township. We're showing a modest increase or a CPI increase in fiscal year 23. Moving down to the grant revenue in fiscal year 21, 2.4 million. 1.8 of that is grant dollars, so one-time grant dollars. 1.6 was CARES dollars, and 200,000 was a election grant, a court grant, or a city clerk election grant. And so as those have dropped off, we're down to around 600,000. You can see in fiscal year 23, it drops to 450. That is the difference in our fire staffing. It's called the SAFER grant. So we have a grant that helps fund the 3 staff members in our fire department, and that grant is finished in fiscal year '23. So that's why there's a decline there. Any questions on revenue before I jump on?
Can you separate the marijuana taxes from the property taxes? Can they have their own line?
If you look in the detail, they do have their own line. So if
Okay.
you go to page
All right, that's-
16 in the document, they are separated.
And is it the same for the court parking fees and the ordinance fines and costs? Is that broken down further?
That is the detail that's our general ledger detail, are those categories, parking versus ordinance fines.
Okay.
So we would need to get that information from the court if we wanted more information.
Yeah, I'm interested in the maybe top 5 to 7. I don't know if it's parking fine groups or how it's categorized, but where those costs are coming from. And same with the ordinance fines and costs, like just kind of the top 5 or 7 ordinance fines or costs. And if it includes the escalation that happens when you get a parking ticket, and then which happened to me recently, got a parking ticket, didn't pay it, then got fined more, then was told I was going to get a bench warrant issued. And so, like, my question is some of this also because of an escalation that seems to happen kind of fast to me in the city of East Lansing? So I just want to understand if that's included in these fines that we're getting in the city.
It would include it if those fees have been assessed, it would be shown in that line item, yes. How much of it is, I don't know. We'd have to ask that information from the court. Any other questions on this revenue forecast part?
Nope.
Okay. Next slide, we thought it might be prudent just to kind of take a step back and talk about our history of our revenue. We've had a lot of conversations of, where we've been and where we're going, and it was actually kind of interesting to put this slide together because I started back in 2006, so pre-recession. And the line at the top is a core inflation average of 2.07% from 2006 to 2022. So had we have just had growth of 2% over the last 15 years, we would be at $47 million of revenue. So you can see really all these gaps between the line and our bar graph is really lost revenue over the years, and really what our challenge has been and why we've had to manage very, very carefully, and maybe why we haven't been able to make as much into our pension as we would have liked, or why we've had to cut positions or change services, do more with less. So I think this is just a really good, although not very exciting, representation of why we are where we are today, why the income tax was needed, what challenges have we faced. So in government, right, your revenue is kind of a given number, a fixed number. You don't really get to arbitrarily impact that, not very easily anyway, right? You can ask for a Headley override, you can raise taxes, you can impose an income tax. There's things you can do, but none of that is exciting or fun things to do to your residents. But I think, with the revenue sharing, property taxes, all these changes over the years, it really is why we've had challenges. The next slide lays it out more in a table format, which I'm more of a number table person, but the graph is here for those that are more of a visual person. But I wanted to point out a couple things. In fiscal year 2007, our property taxes were $17.4 million. The recession came, property tax values declined, rapidly assessed values declined. It took us all the way to fiscal year 2019 before we recovered back to the level that we were at in fiscal year 2007. So with Proposal A and Headley, the growth in property taxes is so limited. And so that recession really, really hurts any municipality. So I think that's like kind of an astounding number, honestly, when you look at it. I had kind of forgotten about that fact because it's, been COVID and all these other things are happening. But
I'd point out an interesting thing about that is it can fall pretty fast, but it doesn't go up very quickly at all. So it can fall, and then it goes up very incrementally. So getting back to where you were takes a long time, and we see that 12 years later, we get back to where we were.
And then in fiscal year 20, you can see that our property taxes declined significantly, down to 13.2, but that was because of the income tax being in place, and we did a full 5 mil reduction to property taxes. You'll also see that transfer from the income tax established in fiscal year 20, so that big chunk added to the top. I want to point out under fines and forfeitures, back in 2007, we were at approximately $3 million. We kind of hovered around that $3 million mark for quite a while. Started declining in 2017, 2018, 2020, another significant impact. Some of that may be due to COVID. 21, another decline, and we're expecting to see some rebound, but probably more to a normal amount at about $1 million. So that is a $2 million reduction in the last 15 years. The other thing I wanted to point out is our franchise fees in fiscal year 18 is when the BWL money started coming in, so you can see a bump there. And I think that's it, unless anybody else has any questions in some of these changes. Or if, George, if you have anything you want to add.
I would like to go back to the prior slide. So I think also the important thing here is during this entire time, I call it kind of a missing decade that we had in terms of local government from 2008 till 2019 or 18, we started to get a little bit of upturn again, and actually with the passage of the income tax, that during this time it was continuous belt tightening. It was reducing positions. It was holding back in terms of wages. It was a very difficult time in terms of local government. With the passage of the income tax, we had a slight bit of relief, and then we were able to ratchet up wages a little bit and also add some positions back. The challenge again now is that while some income sources have gone better, some have not. And now we're back in a little bit of a challenge again. So it's not like we have been in a situation where there's been spending. It has been a challenging situation for the prior decade, and now we're a little bit back into that same situation again because, again, we have the income tax coming in, but we have other sources that go back down. We have property taxes that just doesn't grow. And when your second biggest source of income, or your first biggest source of income doesn't grow, it makes it pretty difficult when the price of healthcare, the price of gas, the price of everything goes up. And of course, your employees' salaries need to go up so you can recruit and retain the right people. But I think Jill's going to get to a slide next which shows the wage growth, which I think is very interesting to show what this sort of missing decade of revenue growth looks like in terms of how we've had to compensate people or hold back in compensation.
So Jackson, if you want to go to the one titled expenditure discussion.
If I may. This graph, the revenue graph, is telling me two different things. And one of them is that I think we've made progress because in our policing approach, I mean, part of it is we've had fewer people in town, but for as long as I can remember, East Lansing has been considered the town that balanced its budget based on speeding tickets and other minor infractions. And I really see that dropping, in part because the give or take 28,000 people who are most likely to pay those fines haven't been around as much, but I do see progress there, and I find that decline in revenue encouraging. I never like to see a decline in revenue, but if there's going to be one, good. I'm glad it's there. But my second thought is, as I look at this, we see the property taxes decline, and of course, the transfer income tax come on. And while there is an increase, I'm not sure, perhaps you could tell me, did we actually benefit from changing that package? I mean, it's always good to have more legs on the stool. I understand that. But financially, as we look at this, I don't see a fiscal gain by doing that. And I'm not looking back in time, as we look at the numbers, has it played out as we expected?
I would say we definitely have gained from the income tax. You know, there has been this replacement, so we wanted to make sure our taxpayers, our residents, had some offset, so we didn't take the full 18 mils and add an income tax. They wanted to be that offset. But we knew we were benefiting about $5 million. It worked out a little bit more than that. But of course, it's been allocated pension, infrastructure, and then public safety. So has it helped us? Absolutely. With the other things, the give and take, and the fact that property taxes haven't gone up and the expenses have gone up, you know, we're still in a situation where we have challenges. If we were back without the income tax, we would be a different organization. We would have to be a much leaner, much smaller organization than we were before. So I think absolutely it has helped us.
And I think the other part is the payment, the supplemental payment to the pension plan and the infrastructure amount coming from the income tax is not reflected here. That's in the income tax fund, so you're not seeing that here as revenue necessarily.
And in some way, that's building for the future and trying to fix long-term problems for the future, which will benefit the city years from now.
I understand, but as I look at where we were going generally with property taxes, you know, we see the transfer from the income tax make that up somewhat, but I don't see that based on revenue alone that we've captured at least what I had expected when it was before the public in 2018, before I became on council.
I think if I'm understanding George and Jill correctly, not all of the income tax is represented in these numbers. This is only the part that comes into the general fund. So there's more income tax in the system, it's just not in these charts. Is that
That's correct.
a simplistic way of putting it? Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, still.
It's probably double the amount of income tax on what's shown here.
Because this is really just
Is there any
what was
way-
meant to offset the property taxes, net zero, essentially?
And the 20% public safety allocation.
Oh, and the 20% public safety.
And
okay.
where is that reflected in our
The
material?
20% and the reimbursed for lower property taxes is all in that transfer from income tax line. So about 1.3 in fiscal year '22 is public safety. So the rest of that would be reimbursement for the lower property taxes.
Where is the graph showing the missing income from the income tax? I mean, if that's a fraction of it, do we have something that shows where we are with it included, all of it included?
No, nothing in here shows you the full picture of the income tax.
Okay.
But I can provide that to you if you would like it.
Sure, that'd be great.
We're at about $12 million of income tax in a year.
Okay.
And we lost between 5 and 6 million in property taxes by reducing it by 5 mils, if that provides any clarity. Okay. Any other questions before I move on to expenditures? Okay. So on the expenditures, it'll be a lot quicker because 75% of our expenditures are personnel costs, right? So once we talk about personnel, we've talked about majority of our expenditures in the general fund. Starting out at the top again, salaries and wages. We've had some fluctuations, so you'll see that our 22 expectation is lower than budget. 21 was quite low as well. We've had a lot of vacancies. We were holding vacancies. We've continued to have vacancies. You can see quite a large increase in 23. It's not because we're adding a bunch or giving huge increases. It does include a 3% cost of living, but it also factors in filling every vacant position that we currently have, which are quite a few. It also includes merit increases or steps, however you want to look at it. So that's why you're seeing a 7.2% increase. We did project in the outer years, like fiscal year '24 at a 3% COLA. And then after that, I did a 2% COLA because it was making me nervous. But that's where we're at in those, on the COLA side of things. For retirement, fiscal year '22 and fiscal year '23 are pretty bleak. If you remember, fiscal year '22 included an assumption change from MERS, in that the investment rate of return went from 7.75% down to 7.35%. That in turn increased our liability, which also increased our required contribution. In fiscal year '23, they did more assumption changes, and this was on the demographic side. So they did a study, realized that specifically municipal employees live longer. So mortality tables were expanded, updated, again, increasing our total liability, increasing our total required contribution. So that's why you're seeing some large increases. Now, with all that said, MERS continues to talk about, are their assumptions correct and what other changes need to happen. I don't know of anything specific that they're doing quite yet. They have talked about reducing the investment rate of return more, but we've gotten nothing from them on when that will happen or by how much. So we will just have to stay tuned on that. A positive on the MERS side, pension side, is with these supplemental contributions that we've been making, the ballpark estimates they have given us does show, and so does our valuation, does show that we start seeing our required contribution starts to flatten out. So in fiscal year '24, we're supposed to start seeing that number flatten out, so we're not going to be seeing these 10% increases going forward. So fingers crossed that that's what's happened.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
The assumption changes, are those on a schedule, or are they just kind of, I guess we got it wrong, we're going to put out one? Like, do we get?
MERS does a study every 5 years. They call it the experience study, so that usually provides some changes.
Okay.
The investment rate of return should be following the market and what's happening in the world. There are studies out there that say, the more average investment rate of return should be 6.35%. That's a significant decrease. That would be significant change to our dollars.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Georgia, do you want to add
Can we
something?
vote on that?
So,
Can we write them
Ideally, they would not be making changes more than every 5 years, but they have done it 2 times in a row, and they are yet thinking about it yet again. So, I've expressed to the executive director pretty emphatically that they have to, give us more planning and more opportunities to make progress. So, it is possible that there will be an assumption change, but I think that overall we've conveyed to them that those assumption changes should be planned out, and that we don't have large swings in our budget, and that they should try to plan accordingly for municipalities. So we'll see.
The supplemental defined benefit retirement line, you'll see we had it at $2.5 million in fiscal year '21. 1.5 million in fiscal year '22 and 1.1 in fiscal year '23. So this is really a plug number to get us to a full $5 million supplemental payment. So between the income tax fund and the general fund, our goal was to contribute $5 million of supplemental payments. So that's where that number comes from. So as the income tax grows, it actually allows the general fund's contribution of that supplemental amount to decrease. Retiree Health, this is for those retirees that were promised health care at retirement. So we spend approximately $2.1 million on that in the general fund. And this just assumes kind of an insurance trend of 5%, 5.5% growth. We are required to contribute for any employee who was hired after June 30, 2018 and is promised health care. We are required to contribute an amount into our trust fund on an annual basis. We have allocated $100,000 here. Our requirement is around $40,000, so we're more than funding what we need to. And I will also note that we have approximately $22.2 million in our trust at this point in time, which is about 55% of our liability. So we're over the halfway mark, which is a positive. For health insurance actives and other fringes, you'll see these large increases, 12% and 10.9%. This is really a function of how we budget for vacant positions. Vacant positions are always assumed to have a family benefit package, which is much more expensive than, say, a single or a double or even a med buyout. So we kind of have inflated numbers when we have vacant positions, and that's really what you're seeing on those two lines. For operating expenses, we really just assume an inflation factor here. I will say that our department heads are much better at maintaining these costs than at inflation. So we've all worked very hard to maintain our costs and do more with less. So I'm pretty confident that we can keep that below that inflation factor, which will help us balance the budget. For the sidewalk program, I am eliminating the hazardous sidewalk program in the forecast, not because we want to eliminate the program, but because we would like for council to consider using ARPA for that over the next few years, and at a much higher level than what we have done historically. Usually we budget about $50,000 in the general fund for hazardous sidewalk programs and $100,000 for CDBG related program or sidewalk program. So this leaves the CDBG piece in here with a corresponding grant revenue, but we're removing the hazardous piece because we're hoping that ARPA will take care of that cost for us in the coming years. I did add it in the outer years, I think like fiscal year 26 or something, back into the program. Capital outlay, minimal, again, between the income tax and ARPA. Hopefully we can take care of those needs. Then we have our transfers out, Parks and Recreation subsidy of about $2.3 million. You can see a large decrease in the transfer to the capital improvement funds. Again, between ARPA and the income tax, our hope is that the general fund has less contribution or support in those for the next few years. And then all the others are staying pretty steady. So that's the seniors fund, the debt service, art festival, public art. So then you just get all the way down to the bottom. As George mentioned, you know, we're in the hole about $870,000. I shouldn't say it like that. We have a gap of $870,000.
We have an opportunity to find $800,000.
As I mentioned, you know, some of my revenues may be a little optimistic, but some of our expenses are probably conservative. So we're just starting that process for the budget. We'll be working with department heads and city manager over the coming weeks to kind of come down to that balanced budget. Moving on to the next slide, this is the slide that George mentioned about the wage increase history.
I have a question.
Yep, sorry.
The sidewalk program, can you tell me what it means if it's flipped and the CDBG funds don't go towards it, but the hazardous funds remain in place and the ARPA funds?
I'm not sure what your question is, I'm sorry.
So you said that you were no longer going to do the hazardous part because of the ARPA piece, and you were going to keep the CDBG piece of it, which is the request, right, for funds. And so what would happen if we didn't request the CDBG funds for the sidewalk program and kept the hazardous and the ARPA funds in place?
So basically, in the forecast, it's net zero, right? Because I have $100,000 of revenue shown here from CDBG, and I have $100,000 of expenditures. So what does it mean in the sidewalk world is it could mean less sidewalks being done, right? If you do both the CDBG and those eligible tract areas, we would get that work done and then potentially additional done with ARPA dollars or the hazardous sidewalk program. I would say they're all probably hazardous sidewalk program. It's just where the funding is coming from.
I know CBDG has different pots of money that can be used for different purposes, but I think perhaps what Councilmember Watson is asking, and certainly something I would like to know, is if we flip that money that is currently being used for hazardous sidewalks and infrastructure out of CBDG, and we make up for it with ARPA because sidewalks are a priority of mine. By moving that money, will we then have some money in CBDG that can be used for social services or other human services type programs?
So,
Okay, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that it wouldn't be eligible for human services because that's limited to a percentage of our total grant. I believe it's 20%.
15, is it 15%?
15%.
So we can't use, it's the majority of CDBGs for bricks and infrastructure programs within the eligible district. So sidewalks being that, streets, community centers, anything like that. If we were to not do it, our proposal coming back in relation to sidewalks is to recommend $500,000 of ARPA funding for sidewalks over 2 years, so $250,000 a year for sidewalk repair. But in relation to CDBG, that's just something the council would have to make a decision about in terms of infrastructure.
Then perhaps while I was daydreaming about some great social services programs, I may have overlooked this. My imagination may have gone a bit too far. So I'm sorry, then what would we use that money, that available CBDG funds for, if not the sidewalks?
We're proposing to use it for sidewalks and as well as other infrastructure improvements in the district. This is only a portion of the CDBG funding, the $100,000. There would be about $300,000 of additional funding, but I don't know what the allocation would be. This is just saying that we basically continue doing what we've sort of been doing in the past with CDBG.
I think what Councilmember Babcock is asking is what are some examples of some other brick and mortar improvements that we could use that weren't sidewalks? Is that?
No, if we're
No.
moving money from CBDG, from the hazardous sidewalks program, we're moving money from the hazardous sidewalks program, right? What are we going to use that 100,000 for?
That 100,000 would be then returned, I guess, in a way, to the CDBG pool to be allocated through the process that they go through.
Which would all be infrastructure and not the human services side.
Correct.
Thank you.
Because we're maximizing our human service amount at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, so second to last slide here, wage increase history. This is really just for your information, kind of a picture on, like George mentioned, we've really had to hold wages flat or have minimal increases over the years because of our revenue challenges. We've also had to make staff reductions and the like throughout the years. We have been able to add some staff back, but now we're getting to that point again of, making some difficult choices as we move forward. Do you have anything you wanted to add on that, George? Okay. Last slide, overall picture. This is really just a summary of all the years. It really shows at the top, the planned use of fund balance if this forecast stayed, set in stone. It's around $1 million. And honestly, having it be around $1 million each year isn't that big of a negative in my opinion. There have been years where we would see it duplicate, multiply and get bigger every single year. So to me, this tells us that we're starting to fix our structural problem, right? We're starting to identify what the right size of our organization is, or the right size of the organization that we can afford, maybe. We still have some work, right? We have about a $900,000 gap here that we have to solve for. But really, I think this is kind of a positive, and I know that sounds weird to say we have, negative $1 million, but I think it's a positive. I think we do have some risks. If our revenues continue to change significantly, we'll have to adjust. Also, our pension, right? If assumption changes happen and if we don't see some flattening of our required contributions, we're going to have continued challenges there as well. As George mentioned, we will hope to bring to council in April a budget that's almost balanced, meaning no use of fund balance or a minimal use of fund balance. Our fund balance is at a point where, we're comfortable, but also with COVID, it was kind of like the perfect storm of we didn't know what was going to happen. So knowing that we had that fund balance there really gave us some security, knowing that we could be intentional and take our time and make the decisions. So I think, that's the purpose of fund balance. It was there if we needed it. Luckily, we didn't need it. We were able to get these grants. We were able to come out ahead and survive the heart of the pandemic, but we still have some work to do. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any more questions.
So what I heard you say was we need more housing and more people who live here who pay income tax. That's what I heard.
Would not hurt.
Broadly.
That growth, the cities are structured on growth and new development and bringing more people in and having offices and people working is just the lifeblood of a city. And unfortunately, we mentioned before, we're landlocked largely. So that means it's redevelopment and it's filling in with smart development where we have it. But growth is an important part of cities that are doing well, are growing in terms of population, people, and stuff. And those are cities that do well financially.
All right, let's grow. Yes.
The wage increase history chart, our top salary earners are they encompassed in that non-union part?
I would say generally, yes. Managers and directors would be in the non-union category.
Okay, and so most of them, just again, they're in that group that got the 2% in 2010 or the 1% in 2013?
Correct.
Okay. And the non-union also includes non-union lower earning employees too, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So let me just clarify that for a second. Councilmember Watson, it would include, the residual group of non-union is the senior leadership, middle managers, professional positions. There's a big residual group of all sorts of different positions. It may not encompass the contingent employees like lifeguards and library pages and parking lot people who may get incremental changes just based on that director making a recommendation.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Questions? Is that it? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I think right here we're going to take, how many minutes you guys need?
10 is probably fine.
10-minute break? Next on the agenda, item 6.3, discussion of proposed 2022-2023 strategic priorities.
Thank you, Council. So this is an important discussion for staff. This really is, in some way, like our management by objectives. It's our 2-year work plan for the city, and I see this really as a partnership between the city staff and council. A lot of the things come from staff recommending things, but this really is council's process to say, what are the things that you want us to be working on over the coming years? So we talked about the budget, and that obviously has some constraints, but I think this is in some way the really exciting part of the discussion to say, what do we see the city doing a year from now, 2 years from now in terms of long-range goals and objectives? So we'll start off and switch to the presentation, and we'll walk through it. I'm not going to be the one speaking the whole time. I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro, and then we'll go to staff, and we'll work through all the priorities and give council a chance to hear a lot about what we're planning to do, and also, of course, provide the input and suggestions and what things you would like to see as well. So in establishing the strategic priorities are established at the beginning of by every council every 2 years at the beginning of a council term. So we expect that these are long-term things that we should be working on. The SPs represent the overall work and improve the organization and the community. So I think about these as well as this is not supposed to be the normal work of the city in terms of picking up rubbish, in terms of cleaning streets and patching asphalt, or responding with an ambulance or responding to a police call. This is supposed to be the things like if you want to come up with a new technique about how we pick up rubbish, that may well be a strategic priority. So for instance, when we switched to single stream recycling, that was a priority, right? When we switched to automated waste collection, that was a priority. Doing things differently in terms of innovation, in terms of saving money, in terms of enhancing service, those are the types of things we're talking about in strategic priorities. So this year, strategic priorities have been linked to the master plan to show alignment between the two documents. That's an important point, that the master plan really is one of the sort of big vision documents for the community. So this links it to that. Strategic priorities, we see the 6 priorities here of recreation and cultural opportunities, enhanced transportation and infrastructure, environmental sustainability, safe, strong, diverse community, vibrant economy and development, and good governance. Next slide. This just shows how this aligns with the master plan categories. So really, in a sense, enhanced public assets was one category. Under the new strategic priorities, this really breaks out into, I like to think of it as more DPW infrastructure and then parks and recreation infrastructure is kind of a simple way of looking at these. But this talks about the alignment with the master plan. Next slide. So for fiscal 2023 budget, we've already talked about some of this, must be adopted by the City Council on or before May 24th with an effective date of July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. We've already begun preparations on the budget since December. And I would also like to mention that at Council's direction, obviously, an intentional effort has been to incorporate equity into our budget by using an equity lens. Staff has received a budget primer from their DEI director in early February, and really what this is doing is making sure that our directors, as they're preparing their budget, are asking themselves a series of questions and making certain that they're incorporating equity into their budget recommendations. So you'll be seeing that as a part of the budget process. February 15th, discussion-only meeting. Here we are with our 5-year forecast, and we'll also be talking or just introducing the capital improvements program to Council after this. April 5, we will deliver to Council the budget and fee schedule. April 5 through May 17th, budget work sessions with Council. Typically, we have those at 5 p.m., as Council knows. I would expect, in the past, we've usually had one open week. I would expect that we would probably be using all 5 or 6 meetings for budget work sessions, and then Council adopts a budget on May 24th. One thing that Council knows is we use as a communication tool, as a planning tool, is our priority-based budgeting process. Priority-based budgeting breaks out our services and activities into programs in order to reflect the full true cost of what it costs to provide a service. And I think that it really provides a useful perspective. When you look at a budget document, a lot of times that 200-page document is kind of cryptic in terms of what exactly you're getting for your money, and I think priority-based budgeting really helps to answer those questions. It's a management and communications tool, and it really says, if you're providing this service, what is the full cost of providing that service that we're providing? And it also helps to show how the resources that Council is spending links and allocates to the goals that you're trying to accomplish. So we will be using priority-based budgeting as a part of the budget presentations during the budget sessions in April and May, and I think that that will hopefully give a much more in-depth look to the general fund. And that's something we heard from council last year, was you thought that there was not quite enough attention to the general fund. So that's something we're planning to do this budget process as well. This is not something you're supposed to read, so don't worry about how small it is. This is an orientation to a document. Significantly, this is the document that we typically provide, staff uses for our updates on the strategic priorities. And it's also, but what we're talking about here is the program and then the action steps are what we're going to be showing and talking about. So these two columns. Now, when you get your quarterly updates from my office on these priorities, you will see the full document. And what we typically do is have progress notes. And the progress notes are usually color-coded by quarter, so you can see what's been done in the past and what are the new steps that have been added to it. So this is just the document that you receive on a regular basis. But we will be focusing tonight on the program and action columns for our presentation. With that, we will start off with our presentation of our priorities, and we're going to have various directors up at the table presenting, and then we will go through all the priorities in turn and give council a chance to ask any questions you want, and of course offer your recommendations, changes, and modifications. And we can plan to bring this back again in March to the discussion meeting again for further discussion, and then hope to have council approve that or adopt these priorities after that meeting. So this would not be your only shot at it. This will be the first shot, and then we can take your notes and take your suggestions and tweaks and potentially bring that back to you in March for further discussion and refinement with approval after that. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Fehrenbach to begin the presentation.
Great, thank you. I just want to mention before I begin that many of the vibrant economy and development priorities that are drafted here for you represent multiple departments. And if you look to the broader document, you can kind of see the main, there's one column that lists sort of the main departments. So keep that in mind as I walk through some of these. So the first strategic priority update would be update the zoning code in alignment with the master plan, with an initial focus on areas identified as priorities through the housing near-term action plan. So that touches on some of what we discussed today, and I think any of the updates, including the effort that is about to be underway to update the master plan on the regular 5-year cycle for 2023, it would also be part of that effort. The second would be invest in parking system with a focus on operational and maintenance best practices, technological improvements, effective marketing, and data-driven master planning to increase sustainability, longevity, and to maximize the use potential. Third is incorporate inclusive and accessible recreation, cultural, and economic development opportunities into existing policies and programming, and continue to implement policies that attract more diverse age groups and daytime population to live and work in the community, and remove barriers to engagement and participation. The third is to identify research, data collections, and outreach strategies, including software and online platforms, to strengthen existing data collection efforts, to improve inclusive stakeholder outreach and informed decision-making, with a focus on strengthening the relationship with our community members, community partners, and businesses in order to increase effective communication with all stakeholders.
That might be one where you might want to talk a little bit more specifically about the types of things we'd envision in partnership with the DDA and our downtown marketing.
Sure. So, so really this is about business intelligence, and it's about using data to make decisions. And so the better we're able to collect and gather good data, the more informed the DDA and the council can be in terms of making decisions. So this really, this is an effort to really increase our ability to use data to make decisions. And so next, and also to, get feedback, real-time feedback, and use input from stakeholders in making those decisions as well. Kind of gauge the various perspectives that are out there so we can queue up a broader range of that for ultimate policy makers. Next would be really a focus on place-based economic development, recreational, and cultural strategies. I think you'll see some of this permeate various activities, but ultimately it's about people-centric activities, public spaces and amenities with an inclusive focus on increasing connectivity and growing overall community engagement across various departments. And we'd like this to be aligned, again, with the master plan and, as appropriate, the Parks Master Plan. And I think you'll see, in terms of follow-up activities, you would see the economic development strategy be updated pretty significantly, and hopefully, align really strongly, and I think ultimately other plans as well. And lastly, on this slide is the continue to focus on the redevelopment of the evergreen properties, with a focus really on balancing the desired uses by the community, but also responsibly managing the debt on that property. So I can move on to the next slide unless there's questions here. Okay. So the next one is the strong, safe, diverse community, or strong neighborhoods. And we're adding a program here. The programs are really the programs as they're delineated in the performance-based budgeting tool. So there's some areas where we've added some new programs. There's some where, based on the council's direction through the strategic priorities, we may be creating new programs, and that's kind of TBD. But this is one we're naming Housing Equity, to continue to implement some programs and explore the development of new programs to intentionally address housing equity issues, including attainability and accessibility. We want to review our single and multifamily zoning districts to consider any changes that are necessary to make them more effective in supporting new types of housing or housing opportunities. And this is really an effort that will be informed by the housing study that we went through. In the near term here, we'll be guided by the 7 actions in the near-term housing strategy. Near-term, I think it's called the near-term action plan. Sorry, but there's a lot here that we're excited to work on. In terms of our code amendments, we had raised an effort to be more current with our property maintenance code, and unfortunately had to kind of table that effort due to the COVID situation. We'd really like to get back to updating our property maintenance code to the 2018 version, and that would bring our whole housing stock up to a little bit better, more timely regulations. In terms of community outreach, I'm going to pass it over to the chief here for the first couple.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening, Council, Mayor. Community outreach, we are doing a couple different things. We're going to the 6 pillars of 21st century policing. We're going to continue that on. It's an ongoing process in the policing field. It started back in 2016 or so, and we have continued to stay the course. And there's like 6 different pillars, and one pillar we're going to be working on is training and education. And I gave a handout reference. One of the training things that we are implementing. We are one of 4 police agencies in the state of Michigan who have been accepted into the ABLE program, which stands for the Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. And this is an 8-hour training for our officers. All of our officers are going to go through this starting in April. And it actually, of course, our policies say we have a duty to intervene and things of that nature. But this is actually actual training that we are going to implement in our agency. And we feel very fortunate. There's only 4 of us in the whole state of Michigan right now who's been accepted into the program. We want every agency to be accepted, but the agencies have not come on board yet, reference the need for it. And so it's a slow process, but we are ahead of the game with that concept. So we're excited about it. It's not just for intervening for crazy stuff or, intervening when there's an issue going on the streets. It's actually intervening when we're starting to see issues with our own employees. See issues where, they go on to a couple different situations, or they're not talking nicely to a community member. We're going to be trained how we can be able to tap our partner and say, hey, let me take over here. Let me just move in here and intervene in a way where it's not embarrassing to anybody, but we are going to, those automatically going to reduce out any kind of negative interaction and things like that. So we're excited about it. It's one of the pillars that we are of course, we're going to be working on this year and things of that nature. Of course, we're going to continue to put our social media thing. We are down personnel, as all police agencies in the state of Michigan are down personnel, and so we're going to use our social media outlets and technology, which is one of the 6 pillars. We're going to keep working on that and do some innovative things to try and get people interested in the East Lansing Police Department. And so it's a challenge for all agencies in the state of Michigan, and we're no exception. So we're going to go down that path. The other community outreach deals with creating a downtown business neighborhood and provide police resources. We're going to have a downtown business officer who is going to be assigned downtown, making contacts with the businesses, having relationships with the homeowners and rentals agencies in the apartments, and we're going to try and create a neighborhood downtown and try and create a neighborhood where we are all working together to reduce the noise, to reduce the crime and things like that. So we're excited about that particular position that we really can't increase because our numbers are so low, but we are going to assign different people downtown in the meantime until we get our staffing levels back up to normal. So we're excited about this concept. Our liquor establishments are excited about having a contact person and things like that. And hopefully our neighbor and the business people who live downtown, the neighbors who live in apartments, hopefully we'll have a great interaction with them creating this downtown neighborhood. As we have problem-solving kits, as you know, we work on these problem-solving kits all the time, and this neighborhood, we're going to have kits that we can be opening up to address the issues that we need to be addressing in a proactive manner to try and solve these. Instead of just responding to crimes, we're going to try and deal with some long-term solutions to some issues that are going on downtown. The other community outreach is dealing with more with Tom's group and my group. Our downtown is very vibrant. It's very important for both of for every department, and so we're going to try and do more interactions with our neighbors to the south, with Michigan State University, and we have some programs already set up. I'm in discussion with the police chief at Michigan State University, and we're going to be working on a couple of different things that is going to be hopefully be helpful for both agencies. We're working with ASMSU. I've been meeting with them on a quarterly basis, the fraternity sororities life group, we've been dealing with them, and of course the celebrations team that we are part of when it comes to the relationship between us and MSU. And finally, we're just going to deal with the increased police exposure in areas of youth engagement, neighborhood associations, and the BIPOC community and student groups. And it's something that we are passionate about. In our faith organizations, we are going to have a Faith in Blue weekend, which is in the second week in October. We're going to start having more interactions with our faith groups, with our BIPOC community, and making sure that we have an ongoing relationship. And so our police numbers are down, but we're going to actually start utilizing some of our neighborhood resource specialists to help us build some of these community liaisons with some of our student groups. And our youth engagement with some of our neighborhood resource people are going to be working with our youth, and they're excited about it. And we have some young neighborhood resource specialists, and we're going to get them involved in our youth engagement team, and they're going to be helping us have some interactions with our community. So we're excited about them. They're excited about it because they're going to be doing some other stuff that we're expanding their role that we first started out a year ago, but we're going to be expanding some of their roles and responsibilities. That's a little bit of what we're going to be doing from the community outreach standpoint.
Great, so I'll represent some others here, along with a citywide one to begin with. The diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically around community events. So we really want to strive to incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion in community outreach, such as support for cultural celebrations and events and support for local commissions. So that's one that really is something we want to address on a citywide basis. Also, from the court's standpoint, continuing to increase the pool of qualified interpreters to assist in court proceedings for non-native English speakers is an important priority. And lastly, for the fire department, to address the diminishing pool of applicants by really working to expand the fire department cadet program, building relationships, and better evaluating employees for organizational fit. So unless there's questions here, we can move on, and I think I'm going to call up our acting public works director. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a side note, Chief, I really commend you for doing this, and congratulations on being one of the 4. I commend you for looking for it, and I look forward to what happens here. We did have a community member who in the past year has really championed police interactions with people with autism, and this is a factor in my home life, and I think he had done a lot of work with the police department. Will that be reflected in your program here?
We hope so. We have a great relationship with Xavier DeGrove.
Okay.
And he is a huge champion of the autism in this community.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not daily contacts with him, but we work with him. And he's always not always in the police department, but we have great contacts with him. And we're going to try and utilize him and his foundation to help us with some other outreach programs also.
Okay. There was a gentleman here in East Lansing who was part of my Future Leaders, I'm garbling the name of it, Emerging Leaders program, Mr. Colley, and so I could forward you some emails from him.
Oh, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask Acting Director McPherson to come up and take the table. I'm going to yield my time to the.
Are you yielding your computer? It doesn't matter to me. Good evening. So we're going to talk about the strategic priorities affiliated with environmental sustainability and high-quality environment. Obviously, one of our priorities is to maintain, fleet vehicle operations and continue to look at utilizing energy-efficient vehicles when possible, and continue to adopt using hybrid technology, and also exploring the use of electric vehicles where appropriate. One example of this is, because this has been an ongoing priority, is by the end of this upcoming fiscal year, through the police vehicles, we're about 43% hybrid vehicles at this point. So that can just continue. In regards to regional recycling, we're going to continue to partner with Lansing for the regional recycling processing and the establishment of the M-Tariff material recovery facility. So we're, working with them. We're treating, or taking our recycling there and looking for local opportunities to grow the material diversion and setting the conditions for, that private collection for expansion to multifamily recycling. As in a partnership, we've continued to work with City of Lansing and the M-Tariff facility. We're working with various grants with them. There was a grant that was issued through Eagle that we were able to undergo a feasibility or a market study for a regional composting option. This would be like food and organic waste. So that's a feasibility study. Obviously, the fiduciary, that is City of Lansing, but we are working on all sorts of various components of this regional recycling. There's a lot of interest in this, obviously, throughout our community and throughout Lansing's community as well. There's also some talk about doing an educational center there at M-Terra, which I think would be a great thing. Just continuing on with solar infrastructure, we're going to continue to identify opportunities to utilize solar infrastructure, whether that be rooftop or ground mounted, and to offset energy purchases and reduce carbon footprint. We're working with Michigan Energy Options to facilitate installing solar field at the DPW facility. We are always continuing to look at the WRF facility to also utilize solar in that location. And we are looking at areas that we can implement some more solar street lighting. As you saw on Coleman Road, there's solar street lighting through there, and there's some areas there in the northern tier that could use a little bit more street lighting, and we're looking at those opportunities as well.
So I just want to jump in with that one because I think that one presents one of those unique opportunities. It's both environmental and it's also a great cost savings. The city spends about $1 million a year for street lighting through the Board of Water and Light out of our budget. So anytime we can put solar street lights in place and we don't actually have to connect it to the grid and use energy, it's a dollar savings, but it's also obviously an environmental savings. So really a great opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to hit again on the electrical vehicle, this would be to install infrastructure throughout, the city at different areas, looking at various funding opportunities and looking for, that charging infrastructure, whether it's at City Hall or DPW, to be able to hopefully support a future electric component of our fleet. Any questions on environmental sustainability and high-quality environment? Hey,
More-
Dana.
Hey,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
You're in order. Go for it.
Okay. All right, so the second box, the regional recycling, that last sentence, can you, maybe it's one sentence. I just don't get what material diversion is. That, can you just restate it, starting from the material diversion and setting conditions? Like, I'm trying to understand what that means.
So right now with our material diversions and our recycling, is for the single-family residential. So we would be looking at expanding that to more of the multifamily and all I can think of is settlements, and that's totally not the right word. Multifamily housing within the city.
Apartments?
So
Yes.
apartments don't currently all have to have a requirement if they were built prior to 2000, Kathy, 18,
17 or
17.
around there, 15 maybe.
They might not provide recycling, so this would provide an opportunity to perhaps consider an ordinance for the city that would require them to provide that service. But the creation of this materials recovery facility in Lansing provides another option for people that if these landlords have to do this, there's a place to help process materials. So it just gives them another option and makes that a more viable thing for council to consider.
Thank you. Thank you. Just two more things. I think two more things. I'm a huge fan of composting and expanding it in the city for residents. And so if there's anything that we can do as council to help move that along, just please keep us informed and let us know about
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
And my last part too is, I can't remember where we landed with the pickleball and the lights, but I have had another communication about the pickleball and the lights, and I'm just curious if you could let me know if there's a possibility for solar lights at the pickleball courts. Just in the future, just remind me if the pickleball court lighting is a possibility.
I don't see why there would be a hesitation, if it supports the infrastructure, but Kathy.
Thanks. So with that question, of course, you know that's actually on my list of items to talk about, but there is a fundraising effort currently undergoing, and we do have a grant. That is something that we could certainly look at if fundraising can exceed what they're hoping to raise for the amenities that they're looking at currently. That could be on that, separate wish list, but currently that's not called out right now.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lisa, did you have your hand up?
I did. Pre-pandemic, one of my interests was diverting food waste, because we have an awful lot of food waste in the city. And it would take, obviously, a longer plan. We'd want to make it usable for people and several different kinds of constituencies. I mean, the apartments are one factor. If they have a lot of kids who are probably throwing away waste, individual households have different opportunities to do that, and of course, our downtown businesses. That got shelved while we were dealing with other issues, but I see hints of it in the sustainability plan, and I just like to highlight it there. I know Ms. DeChambeau is always well ahead of the curve on these issues. She's over in Parks and Rec a little bit now, so Department Director of Parks and Rec now, so.
Yeah, our new environmental sustainability personnel, Cliff Walls, is very much on top of this.
Thank you.
I have a question that might not be the one that you can answer, since I know that our business waste collection is privately contracted. Is there any, if you know, otherwise I'll take it to whoever's negotiating with those guys, is there any requirement in our operators that are offering those services to businesses to have a recycling option?
We provide,
I can answer that if you want. Might be easier.
You guys are a great team.
I'm grabbing her.
we are
her
up
thunder
here together for a reason.
So they are required to be licensed in the city to be a waste hauler. They have to be able to provide you with recycling as well. And so that's something that they may not talk to you about. It may not be something that they're actively looking to offer, but they are required to make that offer, and you can enter into a contract with them. So
Okay.
private haulers do have to have that.
I'm small
that
enough that I
option.
just manage my own waste, but between myself and my neighbor, my business neighbor downtown, we haul an awful lot of cardboard out to DPW, and I don't see cardboard dumpsters downtown. Or if they are there, they're hidden. I don't know. Maybe they're there. I'm just kind of projecting that if I'm hauling that much cardboard, that other people who are bigger than me are probably hauling a lot more cardboard or putting it in their regular dumpsters. So. Just curious if there's any talk about that in terms of our green things, but I'll bring it up at DDA.
And then I think George had me at $1 million with, as we're looking for kind of the direction of infrastructure dollars, rather than kind of the sunk plan of things, you think there'll be infrastructure dollars to do a massive kind of electrification solar project with if we were looking at every single light pole in East Lansing as we're thinking big, and if money came in that way and there was a way towards that, would that be one of our strategies? This is a question at you, I guess, city manager.
I think the strategy might now to be after this demonstration project on Coleman Road would be to see, first of all, if we're satisfied with how it works, but then expand it over. I mean, if there's money, that's extra money to do things, then maybe something we could look at. Right now, it'd probably be more as we expand it or put new street lighting infrastructure in, we would try to use solar where possible.
Yeah.
But
I don't mean our money, so
Yeah.
I'm saying the money.
yeah, I haven't thought about something that large where we would go back and replace existing poles and try to change infrastructure. But Nicole, do you have an opinion on that, about how practical it would be?
I mean, if we're going to talk big money, I mean, I think we should, look at the opportunity of burying infrastructure too, if we're going to get into the big money, and not, but going to solar would be an option too. It's how that money stems down from, the federal government at this point is unknown. So I guess I don't have the specific answer for you, but.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm getting at probably more broadly is that would be we're just coming out of the budget, so my mind's in budget. So if you're saying a reduction of $1 million per annual or whatever, something like that, versus kind of the huge capital things that really don't have create any long-term change in the budget.
Well, it's exactly the point. Like, if we spend our one-time dollars, can it result in ongoing savings?
Yep.
And that's, it's a great point. I don't know the feasibility, and we haven't looked at the feasibility of taking out existing poles that are wired to the board or that we're paying a lease on, actually removing them and putting in solar infrastructure. But that's certainly something we could look at, because if there is money, that is an exciting opportunity. We're talking here, one of the things we didn't mention about enhancing solar is if we look at a lighting project for trail system, to look at enhancing creating a project that uses solar infrastructure only on the trail system. So where we do new, try to do it with solar, and then but to look at an opportunity to replace existing as a cost savings for the future might be a good opportunity as well.
Yeah, kind of cut the cord.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if there's an engineering student at MSU that's looking for a class project, retrofitting traditional street lights with solar add-ons would be a good one. Just putting that out there.
Yes.
Good to know.
All right. If there's no more other questions on environmental sustainability and high-quality environment, we will move on to enhanced transportation and infrastructure, and high-quality environment. I guess it's kind of that one again. All right, so strategic priorities for infrastructure renewal and asset management. At this point, we are working to complete our wonderful $33 million biosolids handling and digester project. We are in the final stages of this. I'd say in that 95% complete, to where we are testing all of our operations to be able to utilize the digester gas to be able to run the generator. And obviously that's the key point of this project. We're going to be able to have a savings, that long-term savings, about $500,000 a year in energy savings by utilizing the gas coming off of the digester. This is wonderful. Another savings on that is reducing the solids that we haul away by about half by putting those solids through the digester. So we're continuing to work on this, and again, moving forward, we're, as everybody knows, we're just continuing to make upgrades to our water resource recovery facilities. So this one is at the ending of its project, and we are starting right again with upgrades to our clarifier and aeration system. The key points to this one is also energy efficiency. We did receive some loan forgiveness because we are utilizing a different technology to be able to reduce the energy that we would be using out there with our diffusers for our aeration system. So that one is just starting, that's just underway. And this one also provides some additional capacity for some of these wet weather events that we've been experiencing over maybe the last fall. So these are all good things. Those are the current projects that were ongoing, and we're just going to continue to look at ways we can improve the WRF to be able to get it back up to, it's where it should be at this point. So, I would say since 2015, we've invested over $100 million, or right in that $100 million, from the various projects that we've done there, and we're going to continue. We have our SRF project plan. The next project up there is the reconfiguration of the admin building, and this does also include solar facilities at the WRF. So continuing to look at that and expand upon the improvement of that facility. With that, and I mentioned the SRF, we're also going to look at various sewer projects within the city to be able to provide some separation and obtain some SRF funding for that, and that goes right along with our SRF project plan. And then another thing with infrastructure renewal is we will continue to invest in our neighborhood, street, water, and sewer improvements. As we look at, what we've done here in the past, we started the Glen Karen project last year. We're going to continue to finish that one up this year. That should be completed this summer. We continue to do our major road improvements this year. We're going to be touching Bircham Road from Abbott to Timberlane. That will be really fun. It will be done mostly over the summer, but there'll be some minor traffic impacts during that one. And we're also
going to rough that one up a little bit so people drive slower down it, right? Never mind. Sorry.
We're going to put some traffic islands
Oh yeah,
on
that's
there.
right. I do remember that.
Yeah.
That'll be exciting.
So, it's also very exciting because this is our first, we received a major infrastructure grant from Safe Routes to Schools. And this is, it seems like forever ago that we actually got awarded this project. And now it's actually coming to fruition that we're actually going to be installing it this year. So, we received about $250,000 in Safe Routes to School funding, and that will be implemented within a couple of pedestrian traffic islands along Bircham, sidewalks along Snyder. So it's great. Another kind of neighborhood improvement projects, we're going to be transferring over to the Bailey neighborhood a little bit, and we're going to do some water and sewer and road projects on Collingwood, Kedzie, and Sunrise. So we continue to look at where we need to go in our neighborhoods. We're not just going to do one road and not look at the utilities underneath. We're going to try and combine those as we move forward through this, and you'll see this as we talk through our upcoming projects for fiscal year '23. Green infrastructure is our next item there. This is a pretty exciting one. As we kind of went through the mega rainfall, maybe I'll say through the fall, it came clear that maybe we should look at various areas within the city to see where it would be best fit to put green infrastructure. And so we're going to be looking to put out an RFP to be able to get a consultant on board to be able to look and say, yep, it makes sense to do some types of green infrastructure in these areas and not in this area, and what types of green infrastructure would be best. And then moving on to the last one here for me is the non-motorized transportation plan update. So this is due for an update. We have been working with our Transportation Commission. It's on their radar as well to be able to take a close look at this and figure out the best components to implement into the new non-motorized transportation plan, and hopefully we can move that forward. Do you want to pause questions or just turn?
Keep going? All righty. So I've already mentioned, one thing I'm going to say is that we say we often, and sometimes we are speaking directly about our own departments, but most often we're speaking kind of collaboratively and amongst the city. So many of these touch many departments as we're going along, and I just wanted to kind of call that out again. Patriarch Park tennis court and pickleball court replacement. I also want to mention that some of these items are continuations, right? So there's not a hard stop at 2 years where everything's completed and we start a fresh round of strategic priorities. Some of these are continuations. Some of them are priorities that have ebbed and flowed and changed slightly over the years or are changing in the coming years. Valley Court Park concept plan. You know that we've come to you to say that we are committed to the MEDC RAP grant application process right now that affects that area. Also other projects, the Northern Tier Trail alignment, also the extension of the Northern Tier Trail that we are submitting a grant for also. We've got updates to Emerson Park, hopefully Stoddard Park. And within that, there's also infrastructure renewal happening at the Aquatic Center that you're aware of. So we'll have this grand reopening of the Aquatic Center and, other projects going on. So we also will continue to review the recommendation made by the Hannah Community Center Committee regarding consideration of a voter-approved measure to fund reinvestment in the Hannah Community Center and the Parks and Recreation System. It's really important that we're looking at sustainable funding long-term and what all those options are for us. But also, there are some approved funding mechanisms for investment in this building through ARPA and through some other options. So we aren't only talking about just that one item there. We are looking at the renewal of the fire station, and as you know, that work is underway, and we are working with the architect on that and with the fire station staff currently. Calling out, completing some deferred maintenance. It's important sometimes to just make sure that you have that in writing, right? And to say that these are important items here at the Hannah Community Center. We've got some pretty big deferred maintenance projects that we need to tackle, and we're calling those out, including roof replacement. I want to circle back a little bit to the solar priority that Director McPherson talked about, in that when we look at roof replacements, when we look at construction and upgrading infrastructure in our facilities, it is an opportunity to look at feasibility of solar. It's really kind of a best practice to look at that at those times, and that's something that may kind of tie into that other priority if there's available funding and if it's feasible and cost effective. Enhancing visitors' recreation experience at the athletic fields through infrastructure improvements. Soccer complex needs some drainage improvements. We've had some softball complex bench improvements. We want to do some further improvements for those amenities too. Encouraging active, healthy, creative, and environmentally friendly individual and community lifestyles. We want to explore new programming, park amenities, recreational and community event-based opportunities, including opportunities to explore zero waste-based events, and events and activities appealing to a diverse range of community members. One thing I want to talk about is that our staff, and when I say our staff, our Parks and Recreation and Arts staff, went through a pretty rigorous process this fall of really identifying what our goals are and those areas that we want to work in so that we could tie these into strategic priorities. So while you're taking a really higher level look, we have a whole list of those action items that will be populating all of these goals. And so I really want to mention the fact that we want to look at what are the barriers to participation, how do we understand our demographic, how do we understand what our community wants in terms of services and programs and protection of our green spaces and our trailways and connectivity and all of those things, and how do we ensure that we have inclusivity and equity amongst what we offer in our community. And so that is just a theme that has come up in virtually all of the goals that they have established for our programming. So that ties into this next one, removing barriers to participation by actively promoting scholarship opportunities, conducting outreach, and bringing back community-based activities. One of the things that I understand we used to do back in the day were family nights where we would bring people in and it would be a free family night, and we would basically introduce all the programs that we had available so people could sample and could see and could be it could be a really good learning experience for everything that's offered. Provide accessible playground, park, open space, access for underserved areas. So are there any questions in this area?
Looks good.
Thank you.
Now we'll just go through the final, which is good governance. Good governance really gets to the organization itself, so the other ones are more outward-facing, and this one is more inward-facing to the administration. So one of the things we're looking at, we always track our communication. Communication is a big part of the, how we try to tell our residents and keep them informed about what we're doing. So one of the things is growing our number of connections to increase engagement across all our programs. And this really is our email, our e-dialogue, our council updates, our Facebook, our social media, and as well as our emergency communication. So we keep track of the number of subscribers, and our goal obviously is to continue to increase that on a regular basis, which we do. Improve internal procedures for communicating with residents during emergencies. Something we take a great deal of importance on is our response to emergencies in terms of what we're doing as an administration, but also telling the residents what's happening. And this is creating really internal procedures and templates for communication for people so that you have all of that predetermined and can try to speed up the response time for getting information out to residents, something we'll be working on. In terms of zoning code amendments, adopt provisions of the form-based code that will allow administrative approvals for land use projects that meet standards established by City Council. What this really is trying to do is streamline the approval process for developers and people coming in looking to get projects approved in the city. And what it does is trying to get council to have more prospectively what you want to see and have that into the ordinances so that when people come to develop, they know what's expected and can therefore deliver projects that are more easy to approve and have a hopefully an easier time in terms of the approval process. Tracking data for the effectiveness and efficiency of our fleet utilization, and this is particular to fire. The fire department invested in a fast response, a rapid response vehicle, and one of the goals was to try to see if there are different formats that you could use that vehicle to limit the wear and tear on the larger vehicles, thereby saving large amounts of money, obviously, for the replacement of those vehicles. So that's something they'll be looking at, is the use of this new vehicle, and if it justifies different responses. Then we get into a couple of sort of e-filing systems. The city has a lot of paper, And that's something that we probably have not done a great job on, is getting that paper into a usable system in terms of e-document storage. So that's something we discussed during the ARPA process, is potentially investing in an e-document system for the clerk's office, for code enforcement, and for a number of departments that are heavy utilizers of paper. And the advantages there is staff efficiency and also access to information for our residents. So those are a couple of areas that we think that could improve. Next after that we have really is the customer service and using tech platforms for that purpose. So whether it's for online licensure, customer service, everything from ways to pay for customers, all of these different solutions where how people interface, so there are ways we can do that better through e-commerce platforms. Also, along those same lines is trying to improve our constituent customer service through a unified platform for responding to and addressing customer concerns and requests, which is something in a centralized portal that we don't have currently. Beyond that, police administration, the chief has mentioned in the past that he is and the department are working actively towards the accreditation for the department through the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police. Chief tells me that we are about 75% through that process, where we will, preparing for the process, we will then have what's called a survey level inspection, where they come in and do a sort of a dry run accreditation, and then after that leading to a full accreditation. So hopefully we'll be an accredited department by next winter, I think is our goal. So that's an exciting process as well. And then finally, building capacity in all staff levels in terms of establishing equity benchmarks throughout the organization, includes ongoing cultural-wide education and capacity building. So this is something, obviously, we've embarked on a very intensive endeavor to train all of our staff, and not just sort of do a one-and-done day training, but to have that the training go out throughout the entire year. We are halfway through that training activity at this point, and I think that when we finish this next year, we are talking now about how we will drive that into the organization, and that includes having diversity and equity ambassadors, employees trained in that area, that will then be able to go out and work with department directors in terms of, and staff in terms of continuing the conversations, continuing the work, and making sure that it's sort of more within the organization on a regular basis. So more activity to come as well. And with that, we can take questions, council's feedback, council's input on anything we've talked about. And of course, all the department directors are here and ready to answer your questions or do follow-up.
Quick question on I think we do a good job actually on the emergency communications. Often not so much with the large vendors and partners in the community that we partner with. Is there ability to kind of standardize our expectations around emergency communications with partners?
Now, do you mean, like, for instance, if like there's a power outage or something like that? So something we're
We've had every
associated with.
type of it
Yeah.
in the last little bit here, just in,
Yeah.
so you can reference any one of the
Any
emergencies.
emergency.
Yeah, pick one, and just kind of we've been up to par pretty quickly, and then the closely affiliated partners, maybe not so quickly.
Yeah.
Is there a way to standardize our expectation for communication?
That's something we could probably do through meeting and influence and discussion. In the past, we have had some trainings from FEMA where we've brought in lots of regional stakeholders for emergency management training and had them all participate at the table through tabletop exercises and that sort of thing. That does, I think, help, get to know the sort of the people you're dealing with, which in a way can help to improve the response times and getting to know the people you're going to be dealing with in emergencies. So that is something we can look at again. We haven't done those types of trainings, I don't think, in several years now, so that might be timely to bring our partners together for that type of a tabletop exercise.
That. And then I didn't see, I know Chief Johnson's doing this in the way earlier, when I saw the cadet piece for the fire department, so the answer's yes. And I know you're doing the same efforts in that. I just didn't see it in the plan, and I don't expect every single thing to be in the plan, but I know those are your exact same efforts in recruitment and that kind of thing. So just making sure that was captured somewhere. That was the only two things that jumped out at me.
I just wanted to maybe dive down one level on this online customer service goal. This is something that I have received a decent amount of feedback from residents on. When we offer a service, parking permit, building permit, bulk waste collection sticker, yard waste sticker, our residents really expect to be able to jump on our website and get it.
Yep.
And so just, I think, kind of across the board, if we've got something that somebody would come into City Hall to pay for,
Yep.
they should be able to pay for it through our website.
I think that people's expectations of e-commerce and Amazon and one
Absolutely.
click and one thing government has not kept up with that.
It has not.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
And their expectation is that we can do better, and I think that that's something we have to work on, certainly.
Awesome.
Thank you. Are you all clear?
We're good.
Okay. On item 6.4, discussion of 2023 through 2028 capital improvement projects.
Thank you, Mayor. I can be very brief because this is really just to introduce you and to the CIP. The capital improvement program is required by state law, but it's also a best practice for us as we look forward 6 years and really plan the capital investments of the city. It's a very dense document because it has 262 line items of expenditures anticipated over the next 6 years. You can see on the left side of the document is kind of the expenditures over the period of the next 6 years. Fiscal year 23's should align with our budget for this year. I will admit, I'm sure we have some tweaks to do before we actually bring this forward to you. It's very much a draft at this point. But then on the right-hand side, you'll see the columns of where we expect to expend those dollars at the various funds that we have. I will note that we added ARPA as a column this year, and have populated those numbers based on a very preliminary draft. So we will actually have a night that has the CIP devoted to it in terms of our budget. I believe it's April 19th this year. But also you will dive deep into this as part of several departments' presentations on the budget. So be happy to take questions tonight, but again, we'll have many other chances to talk about the granularity on this in the future.
Can we get the Ron Bacon light pole solarification project in here? I don't see it anywhere yet. No, this.
He wants his $1 million in light bulbs back.
Yeah,
I think that would be a long-term process to get the whole $1 million, but we've heard it.
And I'm not going to read through this, but I assume I remember the conversation around the smart meters is tucked in here somewhere. Is that under the, is that
I
in
think
here?
this is more like fire alarms in City Hall and
But smart
I
meters-
assume it's not like
smart
desk
meters-
chairs, but.
Smart meters are there.
Yeah, they're in
No, it
there.
is.
It's in here some. I'm not
Yeah,
going to
so-
even try.
This
but I-
tries to be
Yeah,
the,
it's-
this tries to be the overall
This is
everything.
everything.
It wouldn't get to something as small as.
This is the broken
yeah.
wheel on Tom's chair.
Capital
Yeah.
capital purchases are over, what dollar limit? I mean, it's,
5,000,
Yeah.
over 20 in aggregate.
yeah. So it wouldn't be small things like furniture, but it's just about everything
That was
else.
a joke.
I know.
Okay. Big thing. Okay.
It's been a long meeting. My
Yep.
humor is getting more questionable.
It's all good. Questions or comments?
Just to comment, anything we can do to work on those sidewalks. We've had some seniors fall, and that's just not acceptable.
Yep. And I did hear
I'm excited to use the ARPA money for this, but I'm less excited about taking out money that we're currently using for it. Anything we can, the value of this town is that it's so walkable. We can walk to the parks, we can walk downtown, we can walk everywhere, and it's really, really wonderful. But in some of our neighborhoods, we're seeing real strain. There are either no sidewalks, or there are missing stretches of sidewalk, or perhaps worse of all, there's broken sidewalk.
Yep.
So that just remains a priority for me.
Yep.
It becomes a physical health issue, it becomes a community health, a value in your community, anything we can do with those. And I do see that we have some sidewalks here. The ones I'm looking at are labeled downtown, so it's possible if I scroll there are more, but particularly Southeast Marble needs sidewalks, and Bailey needs sidewalk repair especially.
So after your mention of the ARPA money last time, I went and had a conversation with Director McPherson and talked about what sort of funding she would need to have a robust sidewalk program, and that's where the $500,000, $250,000 a year came from. So that will be a part of our recommendation, and it has to be constrained by the fact that they have a lot of construction, and it has to be it's an intensive project to run. But that would be the number we would be recommending. We'll be coming back to council with the ARPA recommendations again in March, so you'll see those numbers in there.
Okay, thank you.
I just have two questions, I think two. Just some things that stood out to me. The Hawk Nest Park, I remember before there was someone that commented that maybe there wasn't a circle back conversation with Hawk Nest neighborhood about it. And it sounded like, from what I recall, that the city of East Lansing benefits from finishing that walkway. And am I correct on that? And then do we plan to, just engage with them more so that they are on board with the changes?
I have to ask Director.
Yeah, I'd have to ask Director, either Nicole or Kathy about that, if you guys.
I did.
It's late. Okay, so which sidewalk specifically?
So
Sorry.
it says finish the sidewalk, I think that's what it said, and then it said Hawk Nest, and it said 10,000 for 2025. Or am I talking about a different project where you all were talking about the playground and paving it, and someone had an issue, it was like there was no conversation with Hawk Nest, that it was implied that there wasn't, to make sure they're on board with changing the grounding.
Yeah, so I think this is the issue where, and I'm not sure if that's what we're referring to here, but the Hawk's Nest Park area had a gravel-type trail or a surface put, and at one point there was discussion about paving it, but I don't know if that was something that they want or don't want, but I don't know, Kathy, if you can speak to that.
I think that the 10,000 that you're mentioning is under the Harrison Road Park finish walkway, and then it goes into the Hawk Nest Park, and there are some expenses programmed in 25 through 28 relative to the natural area management, playground, re-roof pavilion, and improvements to items such as walkways, benches, picnic tables, and signage.
I'm not aware of any calling out, though, of actual pavement. It's crusher fines paths that were updated a few years ago with the additional crusher fines. It was kept in its natural state, so.
It came up, say, almost a year ago. It's an old
Okay.
agenda item. I remember the conversation around it.
I'm happy to make a note of it and make sure.
And so tell me again, is that the same thing or it's something different? Are you all commenting on something different in this? And Tom, if you could tell me the item number too, so I can.
Sure, I
Re-find
think the
it
one
and
that you
the-
were referencing is item number 151.
Thank you.
And that's the updates to the entire park in terms of the pavilion roof. It'll be the, making sure playground equipment has been updated, playground surfacing, which at that playground, I believe, is a wood chip material, a fiber material.
So what Director DeChambeau is mentioning is 154 and 155 related to the Hawk Nest Park.
Okay, well, we've got a couple years, so I'll ask again when it's earlier and something. And my last question was, it said something about the basketball courts in Patriot Park. I just wanted to understand, are you all talking about taking them away or upgrading them? It said remove on there, so I just wanted, or maybe it said replace. I just wanted to.
They're being upgraded.
Okay, thank you.
That project's in process
All
already.
right, thank you. That's all, thank you.
Actually, I noticed that Geyer Park is missing from the list altogether. Is that because we live at such a level of perfection in Shaw Estates, or it's sort of a low-key park? But
My kids want to run a lemonade stand to buy better play equipment that's better for older kids. I had to break it to them that was going to be a very lucrative lemonade stand because playgrounds cost a lot.
I think it's
I think that took the wind out of their sails, but
175 and 176.
yeah,
correct?
that's a lot of lemonade.
Geyer Park.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry, I was looking
Playground
through
improvements.
alphabetically and
Yeah, walkway, benches,
there,
picnic table.
there we go. I'm sorry. I was,
It's not easy to read in this format on the tablets.
oh, it's Shaw
'cause
Water
so-
Park here. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
We can also, when we have it for
I
more
actually think-
discussion, is do printouts and actually give you paper. I hate to do more paper, but in this, something that's so small, it might be helpful.
Yeah,
to
we
have.
could print
Yeah,
This-
it-
this
It's
one might be
formatted for
nice.
11 by 17, so we
Yeah.
can certainly do that.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
we'll do that next time.
But yeah, we appreciate your interest in it and certainly would welcome, any input that you have over the course of the next few weeks. And then as we, again, get to certain departments, we'll get more granular on a lot of these, especially as it relates to fiscal year '23. And then we can, also spend some time on it on April 19th as well.
Any further questions or comments?
Just one other
nice
thought
part.
is, just to make sure you understand, the approving of the CIP is really just the plan. It's the budget where you will actually allocate the expenses, so.
The future years are very, very much, it's almost like our 5-year forecast. It's a projection. It doesn't mean that you're approving all of that. It really just tries to align with the first year that we're talking about for the budget. The rest is just trying to get the information out there so we know what we're doing. in the
Yep,
future.
and just to kind of populate it, to plan for the future, and obviously it'll change again next year, but that's the whole activity.
And plus, we're going to grow, so it's going to be even easier to access all these properties. All right.
That won't add any new projects at all. It will only make the old ones.
We're going to add
more
some new
confusing.
revenue.
Suddenly sustained sounds more appealing, doesn't it, Mayor?
Yeah. Any further questions or comments? If not,
Thanks, everybody, for sticking with us.
yeah, and just thank all the staff for coming out tonight. I know this is extra, so thank you all for your attendance. If that's it, meeting adjourned.